Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Casual Fridays here on Soccer Cards United. My name is Jason, and sometimes on a Friday, I very casually sit down with a guest from around the hobby who's doing something interesting to talk about what they're doing in the hobby, and they tell me about it on an episode of Casual Fridays, which you are now listening to. This week's show is Matt from Slabnomics. The Slabnomics podcast and associated social media content is a really interesting project that Matt has recently embarked on around financial literacy and applying financial analysis techniques to the hobby. So you can find Slabnomics wherever you get your podcasts or find them on Instagram at Slabnomics. In the meantime, enjoyed this chat that I had with Matt from Slabnomics. Happy Casual Friday. Okay, so I am very, very happy to be sitting here with Matt from the Slabnomics podcast for this installment of Casual Fridays. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Jason. Very happy to be here with one of the members of the greatest soccer podcast in the world.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate, by the way, for anyone, just a little peek behind the curtain, Matt has gotten up early to do this podcast at a time that is very sociable for me here in Ireland because we're in a time difference. So I appreciate that as well. So we're starting off very much on a positive note. Matt, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and to a greater extent the Slabnomics podcast and the kind of project that you've embarked on with it in terms of the content you're now creating. Can you give people an overview, an introduction to the world of Slabnomics?
Absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity. So in the past few months, it's been exactly 3 months, Slabnomics podcast has developed as something that I was trying to meet a financial need, and I can go into this a little bit more down the road, but I noticed that there weren't a lot of podcasts that dealt specifically with the financial side of collecting and investment for sports cards. So that's what I started as. I called it the intersection of sports card investing, collecting, and market theory. I moved that a little bit because it's a little mouthful, Jason, to I help sports card enthusiasts make better financial decisions. So we keep it clean, we keep it straightforward. Every episode is geared towards helping us kind of raise that financial IQ. And I've had a lot of guests recently that have helped us do that. So very happy and grateful that people have come on. And I think people are really enjoying the show so far.
Yes, I have listened to multiple episodes, and I think you're doing some real worthwhile stuff over there. It's funny, actually, in terms of the financial element and raising the kind of financial IQ. It is very much the density of information. It's not difficult to listen to. It's extremely listenable. But when I listen to it, I'm like, my God, Matt is really sharing helpful information and teaching people important stuff here. Then I compare it to what we're doing on an average episode of Soccer Cards United, and we're running a circus over here. So it's definitely a worthwhile listen. What inspired you to get involved in that project, and to why did you how did you identify the need, and then kind of what motivated you in terms of maybe it could be a background, it could be just a particular interest to address that need to help collectors make better financial decisions?
Yeah, well, before I get into that, you guys do yourself not enough honor. You guys have one of the most entertaining podcasts out there, and you really inform a lot with what you say. So kudos to you guys.
I was, Matt, I wasn't fishing, but I like what I caught.
You're a humble man, But yeah, for Slabnomics and kind of where I saw the need, when I first got into the hobby, which was last October, I got into it because of certain circumstances around my job. I had this job, it didn't work out. And so I was kind of in this situation where I didn't know what to do with myself. And I think a lot of times we just try and throw ourselves into a passion. And for me, collecting, the activity of it had always been a passion. And that had taken different forms throughout my life. When I was a kid, it was rocks. And then I collected Pokemon cards for a while before my mom threw them all away. And then, I collected jerseys for a while from this bootleg company that did EDM jerseys, which is a whole deal.
Just to say, EDM as in electronic dance music.
Yeah, that's right. Super random.
Right. I know. That's probably a whole other podcast, I imagine.
It's a whole story, man, but it was fun. And I got to hunt, which I think is the activity that a lot of collectors are really using to motivate that appetite of collecting, if you want to put it that way. So I like to hunt things down, whatever form that takes. And so October, I was sitting there and I was like, why haven't I done sports cards for this? I mean, that's one of the biggest collectible things out there besides like coins or stamps if you're maybe a little older. Um, or me because I started buying silver when I was really young. But when when I was in
You're
October,
a
look,
complicated and interesting man, Matt. You could have had any number of podcasts. Slabnomics was just kind of one option for you. You could have a whole suite of podcasts.
I'd like to paint myself as a Renaissance man, but I'm also trying to be more particular, Jason.
Mm,
It's nice to have all these varied interests, but I'm trying to keep it a little bit more focused because I think you can be a little bit better with the value that you can give
yeah.
people if you get focused. So,
Mm.
yeah, a jack of all trades, but you got to be a master of something.
So I
So,
suppose so. Yes.
yeah. So I was looking around. I started listening to podcasts. I'm a podcast guy. I did fantasy football for a very long time, very heavily and frequently. So I was used to consuming podcasts. So the first place I look is what podcasts do we have? What information can I consume at 2x speed? So I found your podcast. I listened to all
Hmm.
your episodes. I found other podcasts like Stacking Slabs with Brett, Chasing Cardboard, which is obviously a little bit different vein, but
Hmm.
amazing. Shout out Trike Cards with what Troy does on his podcast and YouTube channel specifically, not podcast, sorry. So I found all these resources, these tools for people to learn. But what I didn't find was someone talking about how can we apply stock market like fundamentals into the
Mm.
hobby. And to me, that gives it more of a legitimization as an alternative asset class, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where Slabnomics came about because I did a little podcast years and years ago with a buddy that was just a bunch of bullshitting around. So
Hmm.
I've kind of done it before, and I wanted to do something that provided value to the community and gave them something.
I think that's very admirable, and as I say, I think it's extremely valuable work that you're doing. But I think for people listening, they may be kind of like um, we do occasionally hear people from other backgrounds or with kind of wide variety come into the hobby and say, this should be more structured. That we could use more complicated analysis here, and whether that be it could be something like AI grading, or it could be something like how do we build out the financials of this. But just to give people, because we met in Chicago at the SoCo Expo, and I was having kind of heard a similar introduction to your work as the listener just heard. I was kind of like, okay, that sounds good, but what does that look like in practice? And one of the things that really brought home to me the kind of thing you meant was when you were telling me about how you can use these kind of tools to compare the Messi market and the Ronaldo market and their relative value. So could you kind of just, I mean, I've heard it, but I would love to hear it again because I wasn't really smart enough to follow it the first time. Can you tell the listener about that particular project?
Absolutely, I'd love to, and I'll try to keep it as least wordy as possible. Keep it
Thank you.
concise. So I see that as a huge value to people, and a lot of people have liked what I put out on Instagram at Slabnomics in this vein. But what I like to do is give us some kind of standards of comparison across players that don't just echo one card. So of course
Mm,
you can pick, a 2015 select blue Messi and a 2015 select Ronaldo blue, and then you can just compare those, right? But that gives you kind of a snapshot of something that's a little bit more limited. So I wanted to blow it up a little bit.
mm,
So what I developed was this rookie card market cap, and it allows us to give a like to like comparison because every player has rookie cards.
yeah.
So that's kind of the one thing, and we can get into a discussion someday about if rookie pools are important or not, or if they're overvalued and all those things. But for now, everyone likes rookies, and they have one set of cards. Now, you're going to have a lot of different subsets within there, right? Even within Messi and Ronaldo, you have stickers for both, and then for Messi, you have many, many cards, whereas
Yeah.
Ronaldo, you only have one. So Ronaldo had one sticker, one card. Messi with all the different variations for the Catalan, the Campio, all the different cards. It
Hmm.
came out to 13, 12 cards, one sticker. And what I did was, okay, now that I have this pool of the rookie cards, how do I kind of compare them and make them make sense with each other?
Yeah.
So I started with Ronaldo. It's very easy, right? You take the card, you take the sticker, you look at what the values are for. I limited it down to gem and mints. So I looked at nines,
Okay.
9.5s, and 10s for SGC, BGS, and PSA. All right.
Right.
So let's look at what the values were most recently. Let's standardize those by using card ladder. And to kind
Yeah.
of shed light on that, I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know this, but card ladder uses their card ladder value by taking what the last sale was and then boosting it by how much that market has grown, or lessening it by how much it has fallen within the time period since that sale. So if it's been 6 months since the last sale and the market's gone up 20%, they kind of just apply that there, by my
Yeah.
understanding. So now I have all where the values kind of sort of should be if they were
Mm.
sold today. Multiply that by the population. So now, if that means if I had every graded card that was a mint to a gem and I hoarded them all from Ronaldo's sticker and his Mega Cracks rookie,
Hmm.
it would equal this number. And then Messi's was much more complicated because, like I said,
Yeah,
there's
because there's
so many
like
of them.
15 different cards to keep track
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
Good luck trying to get all those
Yeah.
and buy all those. But I did the same thing for him, which took more time. But at the end of the day, I had this pool where if you were trying to gather it all and look at it as one number, this is what it would look like. So now I
Mm.
can compare those. And what I found was that Messi's rookie card market cap was 4 times what Ronaldo's was. And of course, a lot of
Right.
people are going to talk about population. They're going to talk about, you know, how many cards Messi has, just sheer volume. But true finance kind of takes that into account. An efficient market is going to boost every card if there are less of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
So
that's kind of
so Ronaldo has fewer, Messi has more. Therefore, each Ronaldo card should be worth more because if those two are going to be roughly equal in value, which they're not at the moment,
right.
but in an efficient market is what you're saying. Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. And then how does that, just to say, how does that compare then to, like, how does Messi compare to, the kind of the iconic players or the iconic cards in American sports, like your Tom Brady's or your Michael Jordans?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, and it's a great question. The I did another project where I looked at a specific card, kind of an iconic card from Brady, Jordan, Messi, and Derek Jeter,
Okay.
because they were all similar time frames and they all had some similar economics to them. Um, Especially with the Jeter being at such a tiny, tiny gem rate that kind of boosted things.
Mm.
But I looked at all of them to see, is Messi undervalued compared to other GOATs of this era? And if you look at the market caps, kind of going back to what I was talking about with the rookie market caps, and you multiply them out for these cards, they were very specific cards. So I don't want to, like, just pound you guys with numbers here, but this is under Slabnomics. I'll maybe repost it or something so that your listeners can see it. We'll figure out when this lands. But I compared the cards for the market caps to see if the total values of those, when multiplied together, was on par. And the
Mm.
crazy thing is they were. Okay. Like the LeBron rookie
Yeah, that
gold
is crazy.
refractor, the Messi gold prism, the yeah, no, I used the Messi BIS. I used the BIS. I used the
Okay.
71
Okay.
BIS for
Yeah.
Messi. I used the LeBron gold refractor, the Jeter SP, because there's so few of those, like 24 gems.
Yeah.
And then who was my last one?
Brady.
Brady. Exactly. I used the Brady Chrome refractor,
Yeah.
and I multiplied all their market caps out, and they were pretty similar, like spitting distance.
That's
So
crazy.
I was like, Messi does get love, but I think Messi deserves to be valued higher than a lot of those players.
Yes.
Maybe on par with LeBron, but maybe higher. An argument could be made that his market should be way higher.
So that's kind of two examples: the rookie market cap, and then comparing the specific cards with kind of comparable players, and it could be argued to what extent those players are comparable across sports. Where for me, anyway, when we were chatting first, this is one of the reasons, this is the main reason I want to have you on the show, is that both of the conclusions that you were able to draw from those kind of pieces of analysis are not conclusions that I would necessarily expect. So if you had asked me, how much bigger is Messi's rookie card market than Ronaldo's rookie card market, I kind of think of, I just think of the price of maybe the 71 bis and the price of the Mega Cracks in a PSA 10. And I kind of go, well, I don't know. Maybe is it half? Is it, whatever? But when you looked at it, it actually was a greater disparity than we had imagined. So that was kind of interesting. And then you also look at, when you compare the specific card, Messi there in my mind is overperforming. So it is interesting, I think, and maybe you can speak to this. Like, I'm sure you've multiple times in the Slabnomics project come across things that are unexpected or that are kind of go against when you actually break them down and analyze them in a way that's imported from other financial fields. You're kind of drawing unexpected conclusions. Have you had anybody kind of like not believe you, but how have you found that in terms of like challenging assumptions and challenging things that people may throw out or cliches about the hobby?
Absolutely, and well said on the summary there. Thank you for that. I would say that a lot of people, when they see the kind of things that I'm doing, we're trained a little bit to have ADHD these days. So keeping things short form is almost necessary for a lot of content. And because people are trained like that, sometimes when we go through a big carousel post, which I've been doing lately, like 10
Yes.
slides, I think we lose some things. And there can be some comments and questions that deal with things that maybe were covered too briefly in the slide. So that's on
Yes.
me to be able to pull things out. But to really answer your question, I've grown a lot throughout this whole process of finding this data and presenting it to people to understand better how to do that in a simpler way and a more straightforward way to people. So one of the highest compliments that I've gotten from some guests that I've had is that they've said, you put this forward in a way that everyone can kind of understand and come to terms with. And that's really what I want to do. I don't want to
Yeah.
be out here just spewing data and making up acronyms and things like that. I just want to give you guys actionable information where it's like, Ronaldo's market is 1/4 of where Messi's is for rookie cards. Like, that doesn't seem right. That'll probably balance itself out. Because
Yes.
I think a lot of soccer heads understand that. And especially when you talk about Ronaldo, when I talk about my friends in the soccer community, they're like, yeah, he should not be that far off. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think those things, I believe in an efficient market. I just believe that the soccer card market is so small that there's a lot of inefficiencies, and inefficiencies create opportunities until those things level out.
And the idea then, I suppose, will be that as we grow and as more sort of like, as kind of more people come in and more money comes in time, the market should mature and become more and more efficient as it grows. Is the
Yes.
idea? Yeah, I mean, these are all kind of like pretty fundamental ideas, and I think you've hit on something very important there, which is like, you could kind of just be in a bunker, doing all sorts of crazy sums, and as you say, coming up with acronyms and being like, well, the CGT of this is equal to the XYZ of this, but that would be kind of, you'd be doing that on your own essentially. So I think the communication thing is what's compelling to me. Let me just move the conversation on a little bit, because as I say, we met at Socco. I believe it was your first time at the National. Is that right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, first time at the National, and then you were a vendor at the Socco Expo, which Enzo and I were as well. You talked in your review of that show and your experience selling there of this idea of context, not comps, and how you had a lot of people either walking up to your table, or if you would approach someone who was selling at their table, the first thing everybody does, kind of like an old West kind of gunfighter, is everybody goes for their hip to take out the comps before they even say anything to each other. It's kind of like comp first and ask questions later. When you say context, not comps, for anyone who hasn't heard your episode or your theories on this, what does that mean to you? And do you think there's something broken in our relationship with comps as a hobby?
Yeah, such a good question. So when I say context, not comps, you start with a comp, right? You start with a comp because as human beings, we need some kind of standard of comparison, especially in a market like this, where everything is really at the end of the day pieces of cardboard with dudes on it.
Yeah.
So we do need to have some kind of value that's been shown to the market. But with soccer especially, and going back to your point about the market not being quite mature, which I think happens with the 2026 World Cup, the maturation spike. But because it's not so mature, the price discovery for cards is very few and far between.
And just when you just to, if I could stop you there, when you say price discovery, what does that mean? Just to define that for the listener.
Absolutely. That's when the comp actually comes through. When you see it on Card Ladder, August 14th, 2025, this card sold at this price point. Yeah. We call that price discovery because a market is made up of supply, demand, and price discovery. And people don't usually think about that last piece. Right. So if you look at 2014 Messi Silver Prism, the last PSA 10 sold for $2,000. But that was in 2024. Yeah. So using comps like that, it's almost impossible to be able to buy or sell the silver in a public sale because people are scared to underpay or overpay because they don't have the comp. You know, yes. humans need to be told what to do a lot of times. We need some kind of like reassuring hand. And I think that's what comps are. But when you rely on comps, you miss opportunities. So context not comps means if I want to look at this comp and then build in different market value that's happened, and then build in different price movements I've seen in parallel markets or in that player's market itself, and then maybe put in a premium because I feel that the extra growth has gone on. You see this with Lamine Yamal. People are paying higher and higher prices because they want to get ahead of the future growth.
Yes.
Well, these are all really salient points of info because a comp is just one snapshot in time between one buyer and one seller. So when that comp happened, you don't know the circumstances of buyer or seller. You don't know how motivated the seller was to sell. You don't know how motivated that buyer was to buy. Sometimes people fall out of love with a card and they'll sell it for pennies because they look at it and it gives them a visceral feeling of disgust. I have some examples in my mind for that, but there's just so many things that get lost in the margins of comps. And those are the things that actually drive value and make you a better buyer and a better seller.
Well, I think just to kind of make this a bit concrete, like, so we're in Ireland and we're in a developing hobby market, and the soccer hobby in general is a developing hobby market, but then you have, you know, global and regional markets like Ireland that are even less developed. And one of the things that I kind of, people that are new to the hobby at shows or at events or whatever it may be, we often would get texts from people or emails saying, hey, I'm selling or I'm buying this card and there is no comp. And this kind of like sends people into some sort of existential crisis. Like there's no comp, therefore the market, you know, kind of what you were saying is like there's a supply, demand, and there's price discovery. And if you take away the price discovery, which is not something people name and people talk about, but is sort of like unconsciously, crucially important to us, people start to panic and they don't really know where to start. So I suppose I'll give you my sort of casual process, and then you can tell me how I might use the kind of tools that you would use or the kind of tools that you're describing to improve that process. So let's say somebody is looking to sell a Steven Gerrard Topps Chrome of 50 autograph. So from no particular year, just kind of a, you know, it's not an expensive card. And let's say there's no comp. For some reason, there's never been one of these things before. And someone comes up to me and says, I don't know how to price this card because I don't see any comparable. There's no sales, no comps. And what I would probably do is go, all right, well, if there's none of that particular card, let's think of a player that might be like Steven Gerrard. So is Steven Gerrard's market, is that like Frank Lampard's market? And then I'll go, okay, so then there is a Frank Lampard sale, but there's only a Frank Lampard of 25 sale. Okay, so now we're one step removed because we've changed the player, and we're another step removed because we've changed the scarcity. And let's say that was sold in America and we're in Ireland. So now we're another step removed because we've changed the market. And at each of those points of where every time I kind of go one level of abstraction away, I'm realizing through talking to you, I'm kind of guessing or I'm estimating what those premiums may be, or you know, I have in my head a multiplier that I might apply because a certain player is more popular in one place or another, or for one, you know. But when we think about the rookie market cap, for instance, and comparing Messi and Ronaldo, as I said, my instinct for that was not in line with what the actual analysis turns out. So how can we, as buyers and sellers, try and how do we interrogate our assumptions better? Like, what are the questions I should be asking myself, instead of just, or if I want to test an assumption, like, is Frank Lampard like Steven Gerrard? What kind of tools should I be using, or what kind of rules of thumb can I apply?
Yeah, amazing question. I love that one. So a lot of things come to mind, and one is player archetypes for me. So
Mm,
that speaks directly to the Gerrard versus Lampard question. Like, how, when I look at valuation, let's start there. I look at market, legacy, and design. The
okay.
market being how big is that player's market? How big is the market for that card as well, that specific set? And then legacy, how is that player's legacy going to be defined? Are they just
Mm,
going to be a top 10 player, a top 5 player, a top 10 winger? It could be however you look at legacies, it can break down in many different ways.
yeah.
That's why goats are so easy to invest in, because they're like, this is a top 3 player all time. And that's just an easy archetype to kind of level with.
Yes.
Um, and then design has to do with the set. So for
Hmm.
me, there's going to be a lot of premium on big sets, and deservedly so, because they're going to have buying power for a very long time, or
Hmm.
selling power, maybe more aptly in the market. 2014 World Cup Prism is going to be a set that its value just keeps going up because they're not printing any more of that. It's the first year. And as people come into the hobby, they're going to find that set and be like, first year Prism, this is
They're
it.
going to want it. Yeah.
Especially cross investors, right? They're coming in from
Hmm.
basketball, they're coming in from football, they know Prism. So these kind of things are helpful in helping us evaluate what a card's market should be. But it does get complicated, and there is going to be guesswork. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm trying to do with that whole market legacy and design thing is to use it across different sports and different archetypes within those sports. So my viewpoint for this, Jason, my nice to have someday, I need to get on this, is to be able to say, in basketball, the archetype for Kylian Mbappe is this player, Kevin Durant.
Mm,
And
okay.
their
Yeah.
archetypes are similar because they have this same profile, the same meaning to the sport.
I think that's
Um,
just to interrupt there. I think meaning is it almost, it's what you're describing is almost some sort of translation device,
mhm,
because this is a problem that often comes up. People say, especially if you're, if we're in America and we're explaining to someone who collects baseball or collects basketball, and we're using our limited knowledge of their sport, and they're using their limited knowledge of our sport, and you kind of go, Kylian Mbappe, it's like, oh, is he kind of like Kevin Durant? It's like, well, kind of, but not really, because it's a different relationship and all this stuff. But if
yeah,
you, instead of trying to compare the players, you first abstract something from them both and compare that sort of like secondary measure, all of a sudden, that's, sorry, I just had to interrupt, because that's a really good idea, because we have run into a lot of trouble, and especially as we get new collectors coming in from the NFL market, from the basketball market,
mhm,
the first thing they ask is like, well, who is this guy? Like, what is, as you're saying, what is his archetype?
yeah,
Is, Christian Pulisic, he's colloquially joked about as or not necessarily joked about as the LeBron James of soccer. So the first thing they want to know
yeah.
is he LeBron James? And you can say, no,
No,
that's a nickname. His archetype is more like, and then I don't know who you say, some basketball player who presumably was good, but not that good.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that it's such an interesting take, right? Because everyone comes in, tries to buy up Pulisic, and it's like the soccer guys jump on it and they're like, he's not that good. That's like the
Yeah.
first thing you always hear. And then Americans are like, well, who is good? That's American. They're like, nobody. And it's like, well, shit. So
Yeah. They're kind of like, well, the answer can't be nobody, because we have
there's
dollars and we
not,
want to spend them. So,
it's America. Like, we have
yeah,
to spend money on stuff.
exactly.
And so then it filters down to Kayvon Sullivan, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Sorry,
yeah,
I interrupted you. You were talking about what meaning that player might have then in the market.
right. So I kind of think of it like I'm in that scene for Thor when he's like building the hammer, the big hammer that he has, and he's trying to
Mm,
like open the thing and he's connecting these things and everything's straining and they don't want to be connected. He doesn't want to open the shutter to let the supernova, sorry to nerd out on your podcast, but
Yeah.
let the beam of
That's all
light
right.
come from the
He's
star.
building Mjolnir, isn't he? He's is
Yeah.
that or is yeah, okay, yeah,
No,
good. So
well,
I'm
he's building the big ass hammer that has the that Groot does the arm into to
oh, is that when Peter Dinklage is the blacksmith?
yes.
Okay, I saw that movie. I don't know what movie that was, but I saw it.
I don't remember
Yeah,
either. I don't want to get it wrong. Maybe Ragnarok. Seems
who
like a
knows?
Ragnarok one. That was a
Yeah,
good
that
one.
sounds right. If it's well, it's not a Thor podcast. We can I take your analogy. Yeah,
Yeah. So I feel like that when you're trying to connect other sports. I got soccer, I got basketball. And how I look at it is I believe the soccer market, as we alluded to before, is about to hit a massive um, maturation spike, excuse me, in its market. And I think that's going to happen with the World Cup because North America owns 52% of the resale market for sports cards. And the
Mm.
one place that soccer isn't relevant is in that 52% sports card market share.
Yeah.
So imagine when that floodgate gets opened and that 30% of international sports card market share, which is soccer, comes into the US where it's like 5%. It's just
Mm.
going to be this massive, like, new buyer pool.
Yes.
So when that happens, I want to have these comparisons so people are like, okay, soccer is going to go from this 5% to maybe a tick up to a 15%. Now it's going to be in line with basketball or in line with North
Yeah.
American football. What does that look like? What is that? Where can we ascribe values? How much is that going to affect the top tier players? And having those archetypes, I think, gives us a little bit of a roadmap for that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw this in the COVID boom. I mean, we actually, it's funny to be having this kind of almost a full circle conversation for us because one of the things that prompted us to start Soccer Cards United was we were looking at cards and we are saying, okay, these European people they know about the sport, but they don't necessarily know about the cards. The American people they know about the cards, don't necessarily know about the sport. And you had players like Adama Traore was always kind of the pet example. Adama Traore in his Wolves first year Premier League Prism was doing crazy numbers at one point because that is essentially just a failure of archetype. It's just people have looked at him, they've completely misinterpreted his meaning within the sport. And I think we saw a lot of money come into soccer. We saw a very inefficient market and a very poor framework for making good decisions from people outside the sport and from people within the sport as well. And then we saw a lot of that money get burned and leave. So I think it is important if we are kind of predicting a spike in interest, a spike in demand in 2026 and beyond that, we have to have better systems in place. We have to have a better framework in place, even as a soccer community, because we want when that money comes in, we want those people to have a better experience than they had the last time they were here en masse. And so we have to figure out how do we communicate our players. We can't just look at our players and go, he's like, I don't know who he's like, because then that player is not going to sell very well if you can't describe in some way what he means in soccer.
yeah, if you can't measure it, you can't control outcomes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up COVID. And one point on that, when COVID happened, there was so much money that entered the broad sports card market that everything spiked. So, like, money went here, money went here. There's just so much sloshing around, and soccer was so underprinted, especially at
Mm.
that time. And so when the money came in, it just spiked everything up. And when everyone left, when COVID died down, that small doorway, all the money just pushed back through that had jostled to get in,
Yeah.
just pushed back through. So that's why it caused such a crazy spike up and then spike back down.
Mm.
I don't think to maybe calm some nerves here, and this is just my opinion, right? So
Yeah.
just I don't think it's going to be like that here because all the money coming in is coming into soccer. It's not just coming into sports cards and like finding its
Yes.
way into soccer.
Yeah.
Sports card, like the World Cup and the economic impact that it's going to have on this market is very understated and kind of misunderstood, I think, by most.
Right.
The just if you look at like the World Cup numbers and just the viewership compared to NFL football, it's like 10x the Super Bowl for just a random World Cup game, a
Yeah.
qualifying match. And that's going to be happening all over North America. And the crazy thing, Jason, is that when that's happening and the US marketing machine is just rolling, printing out, no other sport is really going on. You're in the doldrums of baseball,
Yeah.
you're in off season for football, and you're in off season for basketball. It's all soccer.
Yeah.
So it's going to be crazy. I'm here for it. It's so exciting. I'm
It
just
is
glad to
extremely
be a part
exciting.
of it, to be honest.
I think I like the optimistic note. And so before we finish the conversation, let's give the people kind of a parting thought in terms of if you are now, if they agree with us and they do think that the market is going to mature and that there is going to be all of this other sports card money, people who are in basketball, in NFL and baseball coming in to soccer. If people are buying into that demand, so if they want to now start planning what they're buying, and we're not going to recommend specific players or anything, but if they're now planning what to buy so that they might be able to take advantage of that in 12 months' time, what are the general principles or some of the general principles that you would like people to, to use and to have that kind of financial IQ and to invest responsibly if we're looking at, hey, the market might have a big spike in a year's time? What are some general rules of thumb?
Yeah. Awesome. So, three of them.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to highlight something you just said, which is invest responsibly. Understand that you have a limited budget. Don't get caught up in things. When you get caught up and you overspend, then you end up having to sell when you don't want to because
Mm.
life. And that's how you lose. And you lose in the margins when you don't understand selling costs and you don't factor those in.
Yeah.
So, first thing, invest responsibly. Second thing I would say is understand where people are coming from. Understand where the new buyers are coming from, which is from the other sports first. So they're going to be coming, basketball collectors, football collectors, they're all going to come in. What are the things that they're going to buy? What
Mm.
are they used to? Because people buy what they're used to and what they understand. You know
Yeah.
what they understand? Color blasts, kabooms, those kind of things. And they love PSA 10s, which is a whole nother thing
Yeah.
for a long term discussion. But so stick to what people who are coming in know. And then the third thing that I was going to say is something that I can't remember, and hopefully I can try
Just
and circle my way back to.
we might circle back to that in a minute, but I think the second point you made there of tried to think of it from the point of view of the people coming into the market, that I can say, like for myself, that's something that I struggle with. I often have, I want to impose my values or what I think is important or what I think is good. And I say I'm going to buy this stuff and I'm going to sell it, and then it turns out that people get here and they buy something somewhere else, and I'm like, but what about all this stuff that I bought? And I'm trying to editorialize. I mean, I suppose if you are kind of talking about this stuff, one of the main challenges in investing responsibly and in buying and selling effectively is trying to take that sort of, you know, that sort of editorializing out of it and saying like you're not necessarily trying to be like an evangelical investor. You don't have to spend your money on what you think is good. You can, that can be your collection, or that can be if you have the spare budget to collect what you like, and that's great. But if you want to invest and if you actually want to sell through this stuff, you have to start thinking about what people might buy and not
Mhm.
just what you think is good and hope that for some reason they have some sort of experience that brings them around to your way of thinking. That is kind of that's a challenge, right, for people to kind of get through their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't just be hoping for a come to select moment.
Yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
see, right?
Yeah,
We love select, and it's an amazing collector's set, but it's not really like a resale set.
yeah.
That's Prism. That's things that they're already used to. And the third thing that I remembered while you were talking is that we need to. Oh man, I lost it again.
Oh,
Oh
oh
my
man.
god!
Oh,
Wow.
I
All
tell
right,
you
it's
what,
not meant to be said on this podcast.
you're gonna
It's
have
not
to
meant.
you're gonna have to come back on at a later date before the World Cup and tell us that we're ending on a cliffhanger. This is incredible. It's incredible drama here on on Casual Fridays.
Yeah,
Listen, Matt, where can people find Slabnomics?
absolutely. On Instagram at Slabnomics, I put out a lot of content, trying to have fun with things there. And then my podcast can be found wherever podcasts are. So YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, I find are the biggest ones. I'm going to be updating my YouTube as I go. So please subscribe there. You'll get to see my growth journey of crappy camera into good camera and good lighting and all that fun stuff. So come in early and sub.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you very much. I found this a very interesting conversation, and I look forward to having you back on Casual Fridays before the World Cup, where we will remember that mysterious third item. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jason.